Okay. Hope everybody's doing well. Bron, John, and I hanging out, coming at you live.
Indeed.
And what are we going to talk about today, Bronny Johnny?
We're going to talk about, I'm definitely curious to hear more about what you're learning in school right now. You entered into a new topic of spiritual wellness, which I think is a very beautiful and important topic for anyone and everybody to dive into. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much you guys are going to be talking about, or maybe you already have, the difference between spirituality and religion.
Funny you say that. We were just talking about that today.
I think it's such a hot word that people have so much resistance to, spirituality, because of their experiences with religion. Not everybody, but a lot of people who have been in religious experiences growing up that were negative.
Right.
Anytime the word spirituality comes up, they have resistance to it because they have so much association with religion and spirituality, when in reality, they're two very different things.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah, we briefly talked about that today, and essentially what we were chatting about was just like the difference between the two, being spirituality, maybe being a little bit more internal, like intrinsic within yourself, self-defined, versus a religion is more of like this man-made, oftentimes it was something that like was created, is a little bit more structured, was created by
a man,
something,
or someone.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to say it, but yeah,
yeah,
something more external.
Yeah, I think of religion as a set of belief systems that you abide by, and when you believe in a religion, you believe that everyone who believes in your religion is right, and everybody that doesn't is wrong, right? So there's this right-wrong polarity that I think can be a little bit, it can be, not always, but it can be a little bit more of an egoic way to approach spirituality versus what I think the essence of spirituality is, like what you're saying. It's a deeper connection to self, to source, to your higher self, to the universe, to life itself, the present moment, whatever you want to call, whatever language you want to call it. It's a inner experience as opposed to a belief system that you think is right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we just started. So for anybody who doesn't know, I'm in counseling school right now, and it's really cool. We basically every 6 weeks do a different modality and learn like kind of a different topic. And so, yeah, we did just a few days ago start delving into spirituality, because that is, I think, a big part of our wellness as a society, as humans, and we were chatting this week about within spirituality, under the umbrella of spirituality being kind of like your life purpose and the meaning of life. And I think it's a really big thing for all of us to have a sense of connection to that. What is your life purpose? What is the meaning of this life? And I feel like this society, so many of us go through the world and maybe don't have a clear connection to that. Like, it's not a huge conversation that is in the mainstream growing up. At least that was my experience.
Definitely not. Definitely not. I think it is now more so than ever.
Totally.
But I would definitely agree with you. It's a topic that isn't discussed so much. And I think that is because of how it's interwoven with a religious connotation. There's so much aversion to that.
Or is it because the 1%, the stronger population out there, don't want us to be connected to something so deeply meaningful that would give us more power,
my
purpose, if we're going to go real deep with it?
Getting a little bit...
Am I getting a little tinfoil hat-ish? But I mean, for real, like imagine when you went to school as a kid, if that was just part of the curriculum, where it was like there was a class devoted to you understanding yourself, what your purpose and meaning of life was, like how much more fulfilling and enriched your life experience would be, as opposed to, hey kid, just memorize this.
I think I'd way rather learn the Pythagoras theorem.
Is that some sort of math thing?
Yeah.
I didn't pay attention a lot in school.
I think I'd rather line dance.
Or the chicken dance.
My life purpose is to do the line dance. Anyway, yes. Imagine that. Imagine growing up where that was actually a part of the elementary or high school curriculum where that those questions, who are we really? What do we really want? Why are we really here?
Yeah.
Those bigger life questions, if they were actually discussed in an open forum.
Yeah, like if you were introduced to that, I'm even curious for you as you're listening right now, do you feel like if you were to ask yourself, what is your life purpose? What is the meaning of this life? Do you feel like you have a clear
awareness
answer
to that?
Answer to that? Yeah. I think a lot of us don't. And another thing that I was thinking about, I remember back when I was in nutrition school, us talking about this statistic around, people who spend their whole life working in the work field. And oftentimes when people retire, it's like very common within a short period of time after retirement for people's health to decline and for them to actually like pass away, to die shortly thereafter, because they no longer have, even if the life purpose was to get up every day and have this mission of going to work and making your money, when you no longer have a mission that's driving you every day and you don't have any meaning to get out of bed, life just becomes mundane, and to the point where we actually see the older population of retirement passing away shortly after that because they don't have a purpose anymore.
Yeah.
So just what a big, important topic this is, and it just doesn't feel like it's
talked about
enough.
Yeah.
Like this is a big part of what can fuel us and make us feel really happy.
Totally. And so what are you learning? What are you discovering? What are you present to upon this conversation?
Yeah, to be honest, it was just day 2 today, so we haven't like fully delved into it yet. But what's been coming up for me is, I think that's something that I personally have always struggled with a little bit. What is like asking what is the meaning of this life? Really, what are we here to do? And I think for myself, I have in the past made my life, often it's just been filled with goals. So like that is what's driven me. It was just like having some sort of goal that I want to achieve. And that's given me meaning every day of like, okay, this week, how do I break that down on a smaller scale of what do I need to do this week to get closer to that goal? But as I've gone through life and you start achieving a number of these goals and you start to realize this pattern of, okay, this isn't really leaving me feeling that fulfilled at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's been a number of things in my life that I've wanted to achieve and accomplish. And I find the more that I've achieved more of them, the more I am left with this feeling of, what's it all for?
Yeah.
What is the point of this?
Yeah.
And so to be honest, I was saying in class this week that I feel like I feel like I'm almost having like a bit of a midlife crisis, where it's just like the things that I used to think were the meaning of life and my life purpose no longer feel like they're important anymore.
Right.
So it's like, okay, what really is the meaning of life?
Yeah.
What is the purpose,
Yeah.
I think even if I can be like fully transparent and fully honest, like
Please be.
Yeah, even with this podcast, this has been something that I've wanted to do for years, was to, being in radio for 20 years, wanting to use the public speaking experience that I've had, but then to actually talk about important things that I feel like would be helpful to other people. I've wanted to do this for years. And it's like, now that we're doing it, I had it like built up on this pedestal in my mind of like how amazing it was going to be in this like big fulfilling thing that I really wanted to do. And it's like, now that we're doing it, it's just like, okay, like it's just another thing that I've done on my path. And I think I just came from counseling, actually, and I was chatting with her a little bit about it. And one thing that I was saying was like, it does kind of feel like, that you've heard that saying, like everywhere you go, there you are. So it's like, you can keep thinking that all these external things outside of you, once I have the relationship, once I have that job, once I buy a house, whatever it may be, then I'm going to feel fulfilled. Then life is going to feel so good. I finally got to that place. But it's like, you're probably in reality just going to feel how you're feeling right now in that experience.
You might get a bit of an ego kick, a feeling of accomplishment in the moment, but after a while, maybe a day, maybe a week, maybe a month, it will start to die down.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's just like, okay, so like now I'm just left with, okay, now it's like been, I think, clicked in my brain where it's like these things that I'm trying to accomplish, they don't have the same, I don't get the same hit that I used to from them. And I think that probably is because I'm not as connected to that egoic hit that I was getting in the past.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, like what does this life look like now? Where do I derive my purpose and my meaning now? If it's not from those things that I've tried to do for the last, 38 years of my life.
Yes.
And
what are you discovering?
Well, it's kind of a current, this is where I'm at right now, to be honest. I think one of the things I was talking to my counselor about today was, I think we're in this age of so much being online nowadays, including our podcast. The reality is we don't get to see you, whoever you are listening right now, we don't get to connect with our audience, human to human. And I think that is such a big part of our humanness is if you want to be a helper and you want to help people, you want to have that sense of connection. Even if you don't want to help people, I think just like human connection is a big thing for all of us. And so with this example of this podcast, we don't get to see, it's love. We appreciate the messages that you send us. And it's so great to hear that a number of you have reached out saying that you've, liked it or
had positive experiences.
It's been helpful.
Yes.
But there's something different about getting a message, words on a screen is very different from being in physical relation with another human. And so for me, I'm feeling more of a calling these days to want to be a part of in-person human experiences where I'm helping others or we're just working through our shit together. For me, that is feeling more, more profound. And I think my counselor was saying that today too, of that it seems to be just like a general consensus lately of since COVID, so much being online and a lot of us still just having this, like Zoom fatigue, online burnout, and just this craving for human connection.
Totally.
And if I were to go even deeper on that tip, so the whole part of the conversation that her and I were having today was like, I was talking to her about like, okay, what is the meaning of life? Like what's the most important thing for us to experience? And she was telling me about, she used to work with like in hospice, like people who are about to die.
Yes.
And the consistent thing that, all these people on their deathbed were saying, it was human connection.
Yeah.
A lot of them had experienced really cool things in their lives, but at the end of the day, it wasn't those things that they were talking about and remembering. It was like their loved ones or the people that they worked with. It was all about human connection.
Right.
And I was saying to her that I feel like that is something that, and I don't know what your experience has been of this, that's something that I never put a lot of effort and energy into and time into building human connection, because I think as a young girl, I felt very bullied and ostracized by a lot of other peers and kids.
Right.
I always felt like our family, I was so grateful to grow up in the family that we have. Like I just fucking love you guys so much. And I'm just like so grateful for mom and dad and you.
Yeah.
Like I just fucking love you guys more than anything. And that's part of why I'm so happy these days is to just be back here closer to you guys.
Yeah.
Cause you mean more to me than anything in this world. But like outside of our family, I never really felt that others cared about me. Other people cared about me. And so at the same time, I was being validated by the world from my achievements. And I think maybe I've talked about this in past episodes, but it created this like dynamic from a young age of like, okay, not putting energy into connecting with people, but instead into achieving and being goal oriented.
Right.
So I'm like just looking at my life and I'm just like, have I been living my whole life missing out on this big part of what it is to be a human, to connect with other people? And just realizing that I think there's still been like a part of me, and I think this is very common for a lot of us. Like a lot of us have social anxiety or hangups around our relationships with other human beings. And for a lot of us, we've probably had an experience along our path at some point where we didn't feel safe with other people.
Totally.
And in the last couple of years, I've been putting more effort into building more connection, community with other people. And I'm just like really I've seen that come up within myself, that unsettledness in my system in my body of not feeling fully at peace and safe with other people. And it's why I've spent a lot of time alone my whole life. I've isolated a lot when I haven't been working or working at goals and stuff. I've just spent a lot of time alone.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of just feel like I'm like, it's like a new way of potentially living. Like I feel like I'm in experiment mode a little bit.
Right.
Where I'm just like looking at my values and what I want to give my time and energy to. And I think there's a part of my ego that is still like I'm not feeling the drive to want to be as
Successful
in
the world.
Yeah. But there's a part of my ego that's still kind of like, are you slacking then? Are you settling? Because I know I could do those things, but I'm like, but is that actually what I want?
Right.
I don't know. To be honest, I feel that internal pull of like, then I start going and doing those things and, the achievement goal things. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel as fulfilling or as good as I think it's going to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at with that.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'm actually very excited for the next month and a half at school with this spiritual topic, because I feel like my spirituality is something that I feel like in the terms of like our health and wellness as people, like what are the things that help us live happy, healthy, vibrant lives? It's like good nutrition, sleep, exercise, mental health. I feel like my spirituality is probably one of the main things that could use the most.
TLC.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't feel like a deep sense of connection to that. And maybe it's from my experience of rewinding back to when I was in Nixium,
Yep.
the cult. If you don't know, the self-development company that turned out to be a cult. There was like a big emphasis in that program around, it was like a very scientific, logical program. And I feel like it took me away, like a lot of the modalities and things that we did in that program were very like results, logical, as opposed to emotional, spiritual, intuition. And I almost feel like maybe that took me even more outside of being connected to my spirituality and that whole area of life.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it made me more skeptical of the woo woo.
Totally. Me too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think since then I've gone through life a little bit more of like, okay, show me the data as opposed to just trusting, having faith, intuition.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've been connected to your spirituality for
years,
a long time. Do you feel like you were always connected to that?
No, it started out when I was in high school and I directed a play called The Bald Soprano. And it was based off of the philosophy of existentialism. And it's basically a philosophy that states, I think, therefore I am. So it dives into the concept that because I can think and because I can perceive, therefore I am. That's what it means to be alive, to think. And it challenged every kind of spiritual idea that I ever had. And I mean, I was only 17 years old. But the reason why I tell this part of the story is because it encouraged me and it showed me that I don't have to think whatever I was taught to believe. You and I were brought up in a very, I would describe as a loose Christian household. We went to church a couple times a year. But I think that that's just because mom and dad, they wanted to do the best they could. They didn't really have a solid belief system themselves. They wanted to give us, I think they were just doing what they thought was the right thing to do, but they also weren't sure and confident within themselves about what they believed was true about what spirituality is and what the meaning of life is either.
I feel like they are pretty connected to that. Like they grew up with religion in their families. And I think that's what it is for a lot of maybe family dynamics is like, mom grew up with our grandmother was very religious, Christian, and dad's mom was very Catholic. And if you were brought up in that kind of household, then I feel like from my perspective was like mom and dad wanted to still uphold that of what they were taught.
Right.
And I remember as kids, like going to Sunday school. I remember mom and dad being in like Bible studies, but it was always kind of a little bit on and off.
Yeah, I don't think they were like fully bought in, is what I'm saying. I think they were trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Whatever that was, but I don't think that they really felt inside themselves they knew what the right thing was. So yeah, when I was 16, 17 and I directed that play, that really cracked my mind open to asking those bigger questions, you know, who are we really? You know, why are we really here? What is the purpose of life? How does the universe work? Who is God? Who am I? And that actually really started my journey into personal development. That is actually what really made me want to pursue this path to begin with.
Of coaching or spirit of
path
of spirituality?
I would say both. I would say the spirituality and those bigger spiritual questions came first, but that ended up becoming tied into my desire to help people for sure. And when I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle and then later A New Earth, a lot of the content in both books are similar. But I think that what Eckhart Tolle and even Abraham Hicks, those have been probably the two biggest teachers in my life. They speak a lot on life purpose and what it means to be human and why we're really here and how the universe works, etc. And for me, I think there's so many different ways that I think I can respond to that question. You know, what is the meaning of life? Why are we really here? What does it mean to have a life purpose, or what is our life purpose? And I think that if I could put it into one word, it would be joy. You know, to be feeling a deep sense of oneness with life. Eckhart Tolle explains that in order to experience that, in order to achieve that, it's about practicing conscious presence. It's about becoming aligned with the observer of life rather than being caught up in the head narrative, or what he refers to as the ego, and allowing your ego to run the show. You're being in the present moment and a witness to life rather than distracted by it. And when we can get, and we achieve that through all sorts of different practices, mainly meditation, but when we do practice that, a sort of no mind activity, then the result of that is oneness. A result of that is pure acceptance of the present moment, pure non-resistance to the present moment of what is, and the byproduct of that is a feeling of joy. And that is the life purpose. He also goes on to say that we all have an inner purpose and an outer purpose. And that is what our inner purpose is. Our inner purpose, our inner life purpose, is to align with that joy.
That oneness.
Which is life itself. You can call that universal intelligence. You can call that God. You can call that higher self. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what you call it. The component that matters is the feeling of pure, authentic joy and practicing that consciously.
So if what I'm hearing you're saying is basically when you get yourself into a meditative state, for anybody out there who's meditated before, it's like when you get the mind chatter out of the way and you're able to just drop into, it's like if you go to a really good yoga class or through meditation, when you just feel very present with being fully connected to yourself, that oneness, that wholeness experience where it's like the anxieties or whatever might have been plaguing you before kind of dissipates and you're just like dropped into that present moment. That is what he says is your inner purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And through that, well, I'll talk about the outer purpose as well. He says that whatever you're doing right now is your outer purpose. So right now, our purpose, our outer purpose is to be having this conversation. And I can, when I first heard that, I was like, okay, well, what about those bigger goals, those bigger aspirations, the dreams and whatnot that we all feel like we have? And the answer, his response is, when we practice aligning our life experience and acting from being in alignment with our inner purpose first, i.e., that feeling of deep joy and presence, we will be inspired to what someone might call right action or aligned action, action that pulls us forward towards creating something that feels meaningful to us. The trick is to not get lost in finding yourself in the achievement of the goal, right? Like you did, and like most of us do, myself included, for most of our lives. And so the emphasis is more on being present, and it's a used and abused saying, but it's true. The joy is the journey, not the destination. And when we can see that it's that state of pure, unencumbered joy that is really the essence of life, then what does it really matter what happens anyway? And the ironic thing is that when you do live from that state of non-resistance, life ends up going really well.
Right. So when you consciously get yourself more often into that, like, I'm going to just call it that meditative state, that feeling you get when you meditate or do yoga.
It's absolutely accurate.
When you get yourself into that state, the idea is then you get more, when you're connected and in that state, you're going to get more motivated to take actions and live your life in a way that actually probably is more authentically aligned and doing things that would genuinely make you more happy.
Correct. It's not wrong to have goals, but the trap is when we become identified with thinking that if and when we achieve our goals, we will somehow be more or feel more. That is the fallacy of the ego. That is the illusion that if I have or I do more or I create more, I somehow am more. That's the narrative of the ego, right? And so I think what I'm hearing from you, you're realizing that illusion.
Yeah.
You're realizing that, oh, my sense of joy and purpose really can't be found in the achievement of some goal. Like you said earlier, that it's just another thing to achieve.
Yeah.
Or, I think we even talked about this in an earlier episode, how Jim Carrey says, I wish that everybody could achieve their highest dreams in life so that they could realize that that is not the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So in response, I want to tie this into what you were talking about with connection too, because I think that a big part of our life purpose certainly is, a big part of the meaning of life is to be connecting with other human beings. However, or I shouldn't say however, I should say, and the most important person to be connecting with is the self, right? Because how many of you listening right now are living your lives distracted by things that you think that you have to do, whether it's for your job or for your family, that aren't related to your sense of deeper purpose or some kind of higher meaning that you feel called to, that you feel inspired towards. I think for many people, they would say, yeah, I definitely have a lot of that going on. And that's a part of the human condition, right? That's the journey of shedding the ego so that you can live a more pure, spiritually based life. I want to say also that I think another way, and it ties into this, that another way to express, what is our life purpose, what is the meaning of life, another way I've heard it said is that our life purpose is about expressing our highest authentic self, right? To just imagine what it means to pursue the fullest expression of who we really feel we are. That's our life purpose.
And I think that's the challenge is when, for the majority of us, that was not cultivated from childhood. We weren't encouraged to be like, who are you? What actually brings you happiness and joy? As opposed to we are told, well, you should go out and go to law school and get married and have kids. Like, I think a lot of us at our core maybe don't even know what would bring us joy. Like, that's honestly a little bit of what I'm struggling with right now is like, okay, for so long, it was just like the goal, the achievement, And those steps towards those goals were the things that were filling my space and time. And then I started to realize, like, is this actually making me happy? Like, am I actually enjoying doing all these things that I'm doing? The answer was no. Okay, so then what actually does, like, what actually does bring me joy? And that's like kind of a shitty feeling to wrestle with for a period of time, because it's just like, then you're just living this life that feels like Groundhog Day, where you're just like getting up, eat, sleep, repeat. And that to me is just like the most depressing, unfulfilling way of living and being.
Well, it sounds like you're going through a bit of an ego death, right? Which is a beautiful thing. And the ego death is when you do see that the part of you that was pursuing meaning outside of yourself is no longer meaning to you. It's like, if I don't have this thing, or if I'm not going to be in pursuit of creating this thing or this relationship, then who am I really without it?
Yeah.
What does life mean without it?
Yeah.
And so the shedding of that ego underneath all of that is actually the essence of who you really are, which is pure love, pure joy, pure spirit, baby.
And that just feels so weird to me now. Like, to be honest, it feels a little bit like floating in space a little bit. Because it's like, even my counselor said to me today, she's like, sorry, this is just, I feel like this is just something that has been, it's fucking heavy. Like, it's like your existential crisis is a bit of a heavy thing. Yeah. And it can feel a little bit, like I said, a little depressing when you're waking up and you're like, what is the meaning of this life? Like, what am I doing? But she was saying to me today, she's like, you are not your goals. Like, that is not who you are.
Right.
So for me now to like have that kind of removed, it's just like, okay, like what am I doing every day? Like, it actually just feels like a bit of a lost feeling.
Yeah. To
be completely honest.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dark night of the soul situation where you realize that the life that you have been living isn't in alignment with your highest sense of truth, your highest calling, but you simultaneously aren't aware of what the next highest calling is yet. And so I can totally relate, and I think a lot of listeners can relate to that feeling of floating in space, kind of being in a void. It can feel very depressing. It can feel very lonely. It can feel even scary.
And I know you went through this when you left, when you were in your 20s, you left acting school to pursue coaching.
Yes.
You went through that then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us do like maybe go through an experience of, at one point in our lives, maybe we did feel connected and in alignment with what we were doing. Like when I was, all throughout my 20s, I felt very connected to like being in what I was doing with my career, with radio. And I think for a lot of us, maybe for a certain period of time in our lives, it feels like it is bringing us fulfillment and joy. And as humans, we evolve and change. And then maybe at some point it's no longer in alignment anymore. And it doesn't feel, you're not feeling that anymore. But then it's like asking yourself, exactly as you just said, okay, if this isn't what I'm doing anymore, if this isn't filling my bucket, then like what is? Mm-hmm. And that exploration of then finding out what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think another way to express what that looks like is being able to achieve consciously a state of being where you feel no resistance in your mind, in your body, and in your heart. Mm-hmm. When you can feel that sense of what I might call pure flow, or pure, I even experience it as like pure God. I'm experiencing it right now in this moment because I practice it, and especially being back into the yoga room for the past like 2.5, 3 months, I've just been deepening that into my body so deeply. And when we can practice that state independently of what's happening in our world, what can be better than that?
Yeah. No, it's so true.
And then Tolle talks about the 3 modalities of conscious living at the end of A New Earth. And he says that the first modality is having acceptance of wherever you are. So, and listeners, think about this in consideration to connecting with this deeper part of yourself or your sense of life purpose. If you want to achieve that, if you want to experience that, the first thing is about accepting where you're at in life right now. And I would say the opposite of that is to be judging ourselves for where we're at. How many of us have a problem with that?
Oh, yeah.
Letting that little egoic voice get in the way to say that where I am right now is unacceptable. I should be better. I should be further along my path. I know that I've struggled with that so much in my life, right? So the first modality of conscious living is to be in a state of acceptance of what is. And the second modality is joy. So you might not be able to, the example that he gives in the book is you might not be able to take joy in having to change your tire at 3 a.m. in the morning and in the middle of the highway on a rainy road. So you might not be able to enjoy that, but you can accept it, right? You can accept that for now in this moment, this is what it is. And that's where that you hear spiritual people saying that all the time. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
And so the way I see it is on top of acceptance, there is a certain degree of heightened energy to the state of joy where you are really in love with the moment, right? You are really in love with whatever you're doing. And you can practice this as you're moving through life. Catch yourself, be aware of self when you're driving to work or waking up in the morning, having a shower, connecting with your kids or your colleagues. Be observant of self and to check yourself. How much resistance do I have in my mind and my body right now? Can I allow myself to be more accepting and non-judgmental of this present moment? And if I can I even find the joy of this moment underneath? Right? It's a practice. And so the third modality he talks about is enthusiasm. And so enthusiasm is a state of pure, inspired creativity. And he talks about that when we are living in alignment with this state of being most of the time, or as much time as we can possibly practice, we will feel inspired to move and to do and to create, as opposed to that other word that you mentioned earlier, motivation. Inspiration doesn't feel like motivation. Motivation implies there's some kind of force behind taking action. Whereas inspiration feels, I actually believe that the root of the word enthusiasm is like in God. That's what that means. So to be enthused means to be moved by God, so to speak. Right? And so I like to think about those when I think of practical steps to move towards living a more enriched, like deeply spiritually alive, conscious life, to have more acceptance, non-judgment, to be pursuing and feeling deeper senses of joy in my life, and to also trust enthusiasm, trust inspired action when it comes up.
Like when you feel that inspiration to something that's your system, your body, your soul's way of telling you, hey, this is a little nudge. This is probably something that
Absolutely
your soul wants, or
yes.
is a calling.
Yes. And a lot of the times I would say if it's true inspiration, it's usually a big nudge.
Yeah.
And if you want to know if is this my ego talking to me, or is this like my higher self or God talking to me, I would say that your higher self, or in the voice of enthusiasm, is a voice that you really can't deny. Whereas the voice of the head, if you're really aware of it, you'll see that it's not necessarily true. That if you really look at it, it quite possibly could be coming from a place of fear or inauthentic expression based on egoic desires that actually aren't really in alignment with your true essence. And I mean, when we're really honest and raw and real with ourselves, we always know. We always know what our truth is. And so I think it's a practice of listening to that voice.
Yeah, in my experience, it's a practice of, I really love this conversation and I'm very grateful for it because like when you say we always know, my response to that is like, sometimes I feel confused, but I think it's because there's the noise that we've throughout the years, different voices in our head or stories or whatever. But it is like when you get into that meditative state, that yoga state, your truth really comes through. All those other voices and stories are cut away and your truth just comes through. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'm taking from this conversation. I'm like feeling very inspired to want to get back into meditating because you're bringing forward just like something that I feel like is so easy to forget. Just like if you consistently get yourself into that state over time, how you are more dropped into your personal truth. And if you can keep doing that, you are going to be more inspired, God-led to live a life that actually feels like more deeply fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Fuck, I wish we had this conversation a long time ago.
Yeah.
I guess because like for me, like as you were just talking about, as opposed to motivation, which feels forceful, that's how I've been living my life.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
Yeah.
Is trying to get connected to that motivated state, which I usually, have my own way of doing, usually like putting a, pump up music and things like that to get myself motivated towards the goals and the things that I want to do. I try to like energize myself. But that has been, I think, also a very draining way of living and being, as opposed to, I love what you're talking about. It's like getting into that meditative yogic state, which is more deeply, genuinely, authentically connected to self. And then you will be led by your truth. Mm-hmm. It's a more gentle way of going through life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm so emotional, you guys. I came from counseling and I also have my period. So
there
double,
you go.
double fucking whammy. And I'm a Cancer. So, hey.
I don't think you have anything to be emotional about. I think this is a big and important topic. And I think that
I don't have anything to be sorry about. You said I don't have anything to be emotional about.
I thought you said sorry for being so emotional, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm saying you don't have anything to be sorry about.
Yeah. You said you don't have anything to be emotional about.
Oh,
yeah.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Damn, ego.
You don't have anything to be emotional about. Suck it up. Anyway, you know.
Yeah. And there's a lot of words that can be used to describe all of this. And I think like one of the biggest things that I want to say on this topic is that, in my opinion, from everything that I've learned and from everything that I've lived in my life, the answer to that question, what is the meaning of life? And I say the word joy, but that's just a word. Mm-hmm. In Buddhism, there's that quote that says, "Don't mistake the moon for the finger that points to it." And that quote confused me for a long time. I didn't really understand what it was saying. But what it's saying is that it's a metaphorical expression for that the moon is a metaphor for the purpose of life, right? The moon is a metaphor for the answer. And it's saying, don't mistake the answer for the finger that points to it. And so the finger, metaphorically speaking, is that word, is all of these words that are trying to communicate this big concept, which is life purpose. And so my point is that the life purpose can't be explained in words. Everything that we're saying is just a pointer to the deeper underlying truth of this big question. What is the meaning of life? And so I encourage people to remember that you don't need to learn anything more to connect with that. You don't need to add any more concepts. You don't need to know anything to understand this. What you really need to do is connect with self, to drop down into the body and come home to yourself. That's really where it's found,
Yeah.
right?
And that makes you emotional to talk about?
I think, I don't know, I got an emotional pang there perhaps because maybe it hit somebody. Because I think that when, the reason why I do this work is to help people remember that state.
Yeah.
I love, I don't know if you ever watched the Netflix special with Tony Robbins.
I'm Not Your Guru.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in that, the producers, I think it's been a while since I saw it, but the producers are asking him, like, why do you do this work? And he just has tears in his eyes like this. And he says, because I remember how it feels to not get this work. I remember how it feels to be in a state of such deep suffering, and it's like, I feel like I do this work because, for one, I feel called to it, but for two, there's nothing sweeter than helping somebody or being a witness to somebody who connects with that deeper part of themselves, peeling back those egoic layers so that they can connect with a deeper sense of self, a deeper sense of authentic self, and that's the meaning of life. And that is why we're here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine if we were all living more from that place.
People say this is quote unquote the time of awakening, which for a long time I thought was a pretty woo-woo thing to say. But I think what that really means is that this is the time where more and more and more people do have an opportunity to reflect more deeply and connect with something deeper within themselves that goes beyond achieving your goals and finding a sense of self within that, that there's something even more deep and more sweet to be found within.
Yeah.
Again, and I think this is important to reiterate. It's like, it's not that achieving goals is wrong. It's not that having a dream and doing things in the world is wrong. It's when we derive our sense of identity with those things and with those goals that makes us vulnerable to suffering in such a big way. Because the moment those things or those relationships, those jobs, those experiences end or don't get complete or happen in a way that you didn't expect them to, you suffer. Your sense of self feels diminished, and therefore you feel diminished and you suffer because of it. And so the higher road is to be able to create the space where you can feel enthused towards creating something that's meaningful without attaching yourself to the outcome. And that's the practice.
So can I ask you, like, I'm really curious for you, what drives you every day? Like, what do you set out having big goals? How do you interact with this? Like, what is your life purpose? What is your meaning?
It's a big question, and it's something that I've been playing with more and more. And I in my experience, and I'm still learning. I think I can grow in response to the answer to this question. But right now, I'll just be real that in my life, what has served me the most is when I connect with that like higher source energy, I'll call it, when I get myself into a state of pure flow, non-resistance, pure inspiration, and I take action from there, that's when my life goes the best.
How do you get yourself into that state?
Practice, meditation,
Meditation.
being the observer of thinking. Even in this moment right now, I feel grounded into that state. And I feel more aligned with the observer of this experience rather than being this little Bron who's talking. I feel more connected to this present moment and responding in the best way I know how to, connected to that state of being. So yeah, to live your life from there, to live my life from there, that's when life has gone the best. So in other words, to make joy the biggest intention. If
Right.
I'm not feeling joy, then what is this life really for?
So is that, I have curiosity with that. So I heard you saying like when you get into that meditative yogic state, when you're present with yourself, joy is what is present.
Yeah.
In my experience, it's not always joy. Sometimes it can just feel maybe like calm, peace, neutrality.
Yeah.
So
Non-resistance.
would you,
Acceptance. That's that first modality, acceptance.
do you feel like the thing in your life that you're always chasing then, or like attaching to, is joy? Like everything
There is no chasing. Because
well, maybe I didn't use that word properly, but do you feel like the thing in your life that you're always measuring what is in alignment for you and what is not is if it's joyful or not? Like, I guess my question is, in my experience, not everything in life is always going to be joyful all the time. There are going to be, I think even on our last episode, we talked about, with certain things that are still meaningful to you that may require some hard work. It might not always feel joyful, Yeah, like if we're just always looking for joy all the time, is that realistic? Is that almost kind of like the spiritual bypassing? You know what I'm saying?
I'll put it this way. If you're not experiencing a certain degree of enjoyment in your life, like in other words, if you're straight up just not enjoying what you're doing, then what's the point of doing it? I'm not suggesting that things can never be hard or shouldn't ever feel like hard work, but I certainly would suggest that if it feels more like hard work than it does joy most of the time, then that's not in alignment. For example, 10 days ago, I got invited out 5:30 in the morning to go and help a buddy move who just started a moving company. I woke up. I happened to have 2 clients that canceled for the day. It just felt like a very fun idea to go and hang out with one of my best friends and move furniture all day. I was doing pretty hard work, but I loved it.
Right.
I was enjoying the entire day.
Right.
We were listening to music, we were joking, we were having fun, and it was a very enjoyable experience. So I think that there is hard work that can feel like joy, and there's hard work that doesn't feel worth it. And I would say that if it doesn't feel worth it most of the time, then that is not the thing that's going to bring you the highest rewards in life.
Yeah. Well said. Okay. Being mindful of time, got to wrap up here pretty quick. I would love to just finish by asking you. So for you, do you set out to have big goals? Do you have like a big life mission? Or is it more just getting yourself in that present moment every day and being led and inspired daily?
I think there's a combination of both. I think we should be aware of what we're being called towards creating. That will, in reality, take time to create. I also think it's important to lend yourself open to inspired action. So I would definitely say a combination of both. I have some ideas of what I feel called towards, but I'm also very, very much open to being inspired by life. Doing the wedding officiating business is a wonderful example of that. Logically, I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah, for those who don't know, Bron is also a wedding officiant.
I was like, this was 3.5, 4 years ago now that I started doing that. And it was like, why would I do this? But Spirit was saying, go, move, do it. And it's ended up being one of the biggest blessings of my life.
Yeah, you
I've
love it.
loved it.
Yeah.
So much joy.
Yeah.
So much joy.
Yeah, that's cool.
So the question is, should we always stay committed to the things that we think that we're meant to do? And I would say yes and no. Yes, if it continues to feel aligned with your highest authentic expression and what you feel what that looks like for you. And no, because sometimes life inspires you towards creating and moving in other directions. And if you don't stay open to that, you could be denying yourself of something really, really beautiful that life is trying to give you.
Totally.
And so I think it's very, very important in all areas of our life, relationships and career, to stay open to inspired action that might be outside the realm of what you would consider the right thing to do just because it feels weird. If you feel an honest, intuitive pull towards something or a person or an opportunity, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to look up, what is that Rumi quote? Let yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you truly love. It will not lead you astray. I've just always loved that. I think it speaks to exactly what we're talking about, of like paying attention to those little nudges, those little moments of spark of joy, like following those things.
Follow your bliss.
They will not lead you astray.
Joseph Campbell.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. It honestly makes me, like, I felt very moved as you were, like, I felt very grateful listening to you speak, because I think this is something that I've really struggled with. It's like makes me realize how disconnected from my spirituality I've been.
Yeah.
And I know this is something that you've practiced. Like, it's really cool to hear you talk about it. This feels like to me like your wheelhouse. This has been such a huge thing that you've been focusing on since you were so young, as you said. Like, you started really in high school, and
it's been close to 18 years.
Yeah, I just feel like you really do have like a lot of integrated like experience and wisdom with it, and I have definitely seen you practice this for the last 15 plus years, and it's just really cool to hear you speak on it, because you can just hear the wisdom that you have from not only reading the books but then also practicing it yourself. And I just feel like this is something that a lot of us are really disconnected from. And when I've heard you or experienced you with clients, or even when you and I have had conversations, to me, this is like the area that you truly, really shine in. And this is just such a huge part of our humanity and what it is to feel a fulfilled, happy life. Like I feel like you just do such a great job of helping people get connected to that part of themselves.
Thanks.
And I don't think there's anything more really important in this life experience.
Yeah, it's definitely one massive piece of the wellness pie, so to speak. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. It's something that is very, very important to me, both in my own personal life and the way I want to help people. And I don't think I would feel good unless I also acknowledge that just because I have doesn't mean I'm any better or nothing like that. And I do think that's important to say, because I think that we can sometimes think that people who have practiced this more are somehow like maybe like more enlightened or more better than or whatever. And it's like, no. I still have plenty of things that I would consider egoic traits or egoic motivations in my life that I'm still working on and that I'm still processing. I'm certainly, I ain't no angel. I'm just someone on the path who is.
He's a devil.
Wow. Yes, feel very called to do the work and to also show up for others as well.
Yeah. No, 1,000%. I think that's one of the cool things of like, as you get older and you go down the healing journey yourself, or maybe meet other people who, like you said, like, we pedestalize all the people who've like the Eckhart Tolles and whoever it may be. But so often you meet these people. That was one of my experiences of even just working in radio and getting to interview like celebrities, musicians that we pedestalize. It's like, you just realize like we're all freaking humans. We all still have our shit. We all still have our struggle. And just because we pedestalize someone doesn't mean that, without their struggle and flaws.
Correct.
So no, it's just cool. We're all on our own life path, and we've acquired different experiences and wisdom. And if we can all just share it, like, how cool is that?
And last thing I want to say is don't take anything too seriously. Because there's really nothing serious going on here. This is all just love, baby.
Which is why we should have let mom get you that. We went shopping the other day, and my mom wanted to get Bron this t-shirt that had the Joker on it. That's, he says,
why so serious?
My mom wanted to get that shirt for Bron for his birthday because she thought he would really like it. But I told her that he's not 12 years old anymore.
If it was a purple trench coat, then I would have said, fuck yeah.
Like the Joker actually wears?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Put it on me.
Oh my God. That's awesome. Yeah. Cool. Well, I really appreciate that conversation. Bron, thank you a lot for that. And I'm sure there will be a lot of other people who found value in that as well.
I hope so. All our love, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway from that is seriously get yourself more into that meditative, that yoga state, whatever you want to call it. Get into that state, practice that more often, have that become your norm and be inspired from that state.
Just go easy on yourself too. It's all a journey, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Love you guys. Have a great
Love.
week. Bye.